Hello, so I'm Amanda Southworth. I'm 19 years old and I am the founder and executive director of Astra Labs. So basically, I'm here to teach you what I wish someone would have taught me when I first started. So this is basically all of the failures, all of the mistakes that I made, and how you guys can avoid them so that we can build a better life for all. So I had a very untraditional upbringing and very untraditional path. So I actually dropped out of high school at 16 to start this organization. And basically what we do is we build apps for people who need it the most, but get it the least. So back in the beginning in 2012, when I was 10 years old, I joined a robotics club and I fell in love with programming. So programming really is the ultimate outlet to build things. It's truly about taking just different patterns or different algorithms and just all of these different assets and combining them to make something that's just beautiful. It runs on its own. And it's basically really like a child. So for me, I am autistic and I also grew up in an abusive household. So my mental health issues and these situations that I faced in life were always hard. And one of the really interesting things that I saw is it was so easy for me to program and for me to build resources and make them available to people. But conversely, it was always so hard for me to find resources. So what basically happened is one day I realized we should just combine them. We should really just take the low cost, really high scale that software provides, and we should just build it cheaply, build it very accessibly, and send it out to people and just give them the help that they need. So the first thing I ever built was this app called AnxietyHelper. I built it when I was 13 back in 2015. As you can see, it started out very ugly, very pared down. And the basic issue that it was trying to solve is finding mental health help, especially back in 2015 when things were pretty stigmatized, was hard. There wasn't a starting point and there wasn't a very cohesive guide on what to do, where to go, and how to move forward. So AnxietyHelper, for the 18 people who downloaded it on the first day, was that starting point. And it was really the foundation for all of the other work and a testing bed where we looked at it and we said, does this method of helping people actually work? So the answer was yes. And the second thing that I ever developed was this thing called Vernea. And so Vernea is basically a security system for marginalized communities that alerts people in the event of an emergency. So if you live in an abusive home or if you're walking home and you're in a little bit of a sketchy situation, this app automatically messages your contacts without leaving a trace on your phone. So the basic idea was we give people the tools that they need before, during, and after some of the hardest events of their lives to make those events much more manageable and much more easy to go through. So that whole thing happened, and I spent about a year of my life just figuring out, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? I have these two amazing apps that I really love, and I just want to do this for the rest of my life. And so I was actually given a $25,000 grant from Tom's the Shoe Company, and they said, go build whatever you want and have fun. And so this is what I built. So this organization that I started in 2018 and that I currently run is called Astra Labs. And what we do is basically what I just outlined, is we build apps and we build software for people who need it, but who can't access it. So we go into these really niche spaces or these spaces where it's not profitable to help people, and we build those solutions that people need. So after Astra was formed, we spent about 2 years figuring out the direction, figuring out the base of it and what it actually looks like in practice. And then so last year in the pandemic, we released this tool called Isolated Not Alone. And it was basically resources and discounts and free therapy for people who were grieving or who were having a hard time in the pandemic. So that was kind of the first micro impact project that we did, and we rolled it out and it went pretty good. So last year, actually, we retired AnxietyHelper after 5 years of being on the App Store, and we turned it into Aetheria. So Aetheria is the successor to AnxietyHelper, and it's basically 5 years worth of feedback that everybody gave to us. So we have done a lot in these past 5 years, and we've learned a lot of things. So frankly, one of the areas that we won in is we were one of the first apps on the App Store about mental health. So we came on the scene around the same time as Calm, which is another relatively well-known mental health app. We hit a cost per person helped of half a penny. In the United States, the average cost per person helped for a nonprofit is $5 to $6. So for us to achieve those numbers was like insane for us to hear. And then we've reached almost 6 million people through our apps and through our websites and through everything that we've done. And we've also lost. So when I first started Astra, I didn't have the sense of leadership and I didn't have the sense of guidance that I initially grew to develop. And what happened was we grew really fast and then I dropped the ball and we lost everybody. And then at other times we were focused too much on short term and then we were focused too much on long term and we forgot our core and we forgot really what we were there doing. And then we fundraised during the pandemic and our donor abandoned us and we were kind of figuring out how to run this organization and how to help people without a consistent source of money. So it's been a pretty insane 5 years. There's been a lot of stuff that I regret and that I wish someone really would have told me. And so the hardest thing about making change is just doing it. It's a really intense process. It's a really just emotionally draining process. And so throughout those times, there were moments when I sat by myself or I was like crying in my room or I was just going through something. And I said to myself, I really wish someone would have told me what it took for them to do this, or I wish someone would have been honest about the realities of what this situation looks like. So that's what I'm here to help you do, is I've made these mistakes. The organization has made these mistakes. The apps have made these mistakes, and we're sharing them so that you don't have to do it. I personally believe in this thing called the social contract, and that's basically a really nice way of saying, other people have done a lot of stuff for me, so I will do a lot of stuff for other people, right? So there's this really amazing book where the author details about how he had his first kid, and he was just shocked at the amount of work that his parents did and at the amount of work that raising a child took. And he went and he talked to his parents one day and he says, I don't know how I will ever pay you back for what you did. And his parents say, you don't pay us back. You pay it forward and you invest that into other people and you do other things with it. So for me, it's pretty amazing that I'm even here, right? Like being an autistic woman in tech, like 40 to 50 years ago, I would have never had a platform and I would have never had an opportunity to do any of these things. And so for me, this is me paying it forward and telling you what I wish someone would have told me. So the number one thing that we've learned is once you figure out how to help people, you can replicate it and you can apply it to all situations. Of course, there are niches and things that are kind of, change as you go. But for the most part, helping people and figuring out how to do it scalably and figuring out how to do it efficiently is a really simple process once you kind of get through all of the failures, right? So there's two components to actually making change and building a better life for people. So those are you and what you do and the mindset that you have and how you approach management. And then there's your work and how you actually go about creating change and, where you work or like what organization you run or like what side project you have. Those are the two things that really come together to build a better life for people. You can't do it without a team and without some form of outreach and some form of work. And that outreach cannot continue unless you're taking care of yourself and you're following through with your mindset and other things that you need to have to be okay. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is your work and how you actually do outreach and how you actually go through and go about the process of creating change. So the first thing that you need to know is trust is the most important user metric, hands down. People will not let you help them if they do not trust you, right? So if you want to prioritize people, you need to prioritize building trust and making sure that they understand that you're there for the right reasons. So at some point in my work, I was connected with this amazing person from the UN who specifically worked on technology and the impact that it had on refugees. And one of the really interesting points that he made and that he brought up was all of these people build, software or they build apps for immigrants trying to help them figure it out. And none of the immigrants use it. There's just all of this work and all of this effort put in by these teams, and the people who are supposed to be using it and who are supposed to be benefiting from it just ignore it, right? So the basic principle behind that is there's not trust and there's a lack of relationship and a lack of communication there. But what he did say was one of the most popular apps for refugees was WhatsApp, right? So from a refugee's perspective, you have all of these apps from people you've never heard of. You're just going into a new place. You have little to no frame of reference for what you're about to experience. And you get all of these people who you've never heard of trying to help you. On the other side, you have an app that you know is reliable, an app that you know is trustworthy, and an app that you know is consistent, which is WhatsApp. So obviously, from the refugees' perspective, they're going to choose the platform and the software that they trust, which is WhatsApp. So when you want to build change, when you want to actually help people, and when you want to go in and basically help them deal with the hardest issues of their lives, they need to trust you and they need to know that you're putting them first and that you have their best interest in mind. And that is really where change happens, is it happens in building those trusts through really small interactions and through small gestures that overall make the person feel and make the person know that they're safe with you. So the next thing that so many people get wrong is that you need to build with people and not just for them, right? So obviously, we all have our own kind of perspective of reality. We all have our own experiences. We don't know what everybody else is going through. And so oftentimes what you see from the tower is not what people on the ground will see, or let me rephrase that. Sometimes what you see from your tower and from your point of view when you're building stuff for people who are dealing with things that you've never experienced, it gets a little bit tricky because they see things and they have an understanding of the terrain that you don't. And the most important thing is talk to the people that you want to serve. Bring them on, give them ownership, have them actually working on these projects. You want to make sure that you're listening to their needs and you're not building for what they think. No, let me rephrase that. You want to make sure that you're building for what they need and not for what you think they need. So build with people, ask them, go to them, make space for them at the table, and don't just expect that they will automatically gravitate to your project or to your organization or whatever you build. So the next thing is there is no savior. And this is not in a religious context or knocking any specific religion, but in the world of social change and in the world where you're actively trying to make things better for people, no single person can do it. And I can say this from experience because I myself at some point in time thought, oh my gosh, I am just going to build all of these apps and I'm going to run this organization and it's going to be really great. And I'm going to be, the sole person to fix all of these issues that other people see. And I'm never going to have to engage. And I can just quietly sit in my little hobbit cave and help people that way. And that's not the reality, right? When you're creating change, you're going to people and you're going to their communities and you're basically affecting the way people live. No one person can do that on a scale that everybody can match, right? There's no possible way in 24 hours that one human being or just one organization even can make all of the change that the world needs. One of the things that I really wish people would have told me and that I would have done is lean more into this and share when you fail, share when you get something correct, or share when you don't know what you're doing. The biggest part of change is actually getting enough information to do it. And the more you share, the more you talk to people, the more you collaborate with others in your field, the higher chance of making change you actually have. Building for people is hard, and making change is hard. It requires a lot of time. It requires a lot of energy. And most importantly, it needs to be accessible. It needs to be trusted. It needs to be building with people and not replacing them or being for them specifically. And it needs to be a team effort. It's not just a one-person game. So now we're going to get into you. And this was the area that I basically had the most issues with. I went in and I thought, okay, my organization is doing great. My apps are doing great. I, as a person, I'm not doing so great. I was exhausted all the time. I was flying to speaking gigs all of the time. I was probably 17 and I would work 12 to 16 hours a day. And I would get on a plane to go to a speaking gig in the morning. And then I would spend, 12 hours in some city that I didn't know. And then I would fly another 6 hours home. And during that time, I would be developing apps and managing 20 people and getting emails from people in like the darkest moments of their life. And I didn't understand why I had everything that I wanted. And I basically had achieved my childhood dream, and I had gotten everything that I thought I wanted, really. But I still wasn't happy, and I wasn't functioning well, and I wasn't having a good time, and it was miserable, right? Like there's just this major disconnect in between, oh my gosh, I'm going to go run this organization, and then doing it and realizing I'm not taking care of myself and I'm not putting my best self forward, and realizing that the only way that you can help others is if you start with yourself and if you make sure that you yourself are okay to do the work and okay to start on this journey. So the first thing I wish that I had knew is cut through the noise. People are going to be talking to you. They're going to be partnering with you. They're going to be coming and asking for your ideas. They're going to be giving you criticism, and they're going to be giving you feedback. And when you're trying to make something happen and when you're taking an action, there's just so much noise surrounding whatever you're trying to do, right? So what I needed to learn how to do is I needed to learn to cut through the noise and only focus on the things that mattered. I know, easier said than done. But what I was trying to do is I was trying to juggle the expectations of people and my speaking gigs and, feedback from this random 24-year-old who has decided that he's an app development expert, right? Like there's just so many balls up in the air. But when you focus on change, typically you have a mission and you know what you're doing and you know what you're there to do. And to cut through the noise, you need to look at everything that you have and say, is this serving the mission? Is this something that I really need to hear? Is this actually doing me any good, or is this just taking up my time? So for me, I tried to be really nice and I tried to entertain everybody's ideas about what Astra should be and everybody's kind of, backseat driver comments about where we should go and what we should do next. And I followed it. And at the end of the day, it sucked and I hated it because it wasn't Astra and it wasn't what I wanted to do. And it wasn't what the organization needed. And over time, I learned how to develop my own voice. And I learned, okay, I know what people want. I know that I need to prioritize user feedback. I know that I need to, most importantly, listen to my own gut intuition, and that I need to stop taking advice from people who've literally never been in that position. And those were the things that I did. And it's still a work in process, but when you learn to cut through the noise, you will focus on the things that truly matter. And when you're taking on something so big, like bettering someone's life or helping someone when they're suicidal or interjecting, when their parents are yelling at them and they need to leave the house or any of those big things, you need to prioritize and you need to focus on what's important. And what is important through all that noise is what the people who you're trying to help are saying. So the next thing I wish I knew was take a lesson in fluidity. Things are going to go horribly wrong. People are going to hate your app. You are going to be very bad at one thing or the other. And things just really never work out the way that you anticipate them to, right? So when I first built AnxietyHelper, I programmed it and I was like, this is the most amazing app that has ever been apped. I am a genius developer. This is amazing. I am really going to revolutionize the world of mental health and all of that stuff. And I sent the app out and 18 people downloaded it on the first day. And they were like, wow, this sucks. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine. I put all of this time and all of this effort into something and nobody's liking it. What's going on? And I listened to people and I heard what they had to say. And what they came to was, okay, the links, I don't need them. The information, I could find that on Google. What's really helpful and what's really actually practical are the tools. The tools are the number one thing in a lot of mental health apps that are paywalled or that, are kind of hidden behind some subscription or some other fee. And so for a lot of people, what they didn't need was the information. And what they didn't need was the suicide hotline or another really generic form of information. What they needed was the tools and the ability to get themselves out of these situations that they already knew that they were into. And so when we started sitting down after we did the Isolated Not Alone project and we started looking at Astra, the one thing that we asked ourselves was, where are we needed most? Obviously, everything is in shambles. Where can we help out? Where can we start? And what we thought was going to happen was we thought we were going to get funding and that we were going to do this really amazing pandemic response plan and we were going to help all of these people and launch all of these cool things. And then the funding cut out and the pandemic response plan stopped. And we were sitting there and we were like, okay, let's just build what people have been asking for, which is more specific tools, not paywalled, specifically for underserved communities and people who don't have the resources that they need. So Aetheria was that. It was a culmination of listening to people and figuring out, okay, we misunderstood why people liked this app and we misunderstood why people were coming to it. And we deleted the code base and we restarted it and we built this amazing project. And at the time, I remember looking at the plans and I remember looking at what was ahead of us, which was basically, we're an organization full of teenagers and we're building these apps for people who are in a really dark time and our donor just cut out on us and we're in the middle of an unprecedented world event. And I remember looking at the designs for Aetheria and thinking, I really hope this doesn't suck. And it didn't. And it was a really practical lesson for me that it's okay to be wrong and it's okay to have the wrong interpretations or the wrong predictions and to not really know what people are listening to. But what you need to do is you need to understand you need to change to make change. A lot of your assumptions are going to be wrong. A lot of your projects might become worthless in a couple of years. And that's okay. The really important part about actually making change is just getting through it and actually putting in the time and putting in the effort to make sure that what you're doing is just going forward and it's making progress. So the only way to make change is to make change. There's no secret formula. There is no recipe that you are going to find. There is no one person who is going to come into your work or into your organization and change absolutely everything and make it perfect. The only way to make change and the only way to make people's lives better is hard work and to take a journey and to mess up and to do a lot of stuff really good, but a lot of stuff really bad and to just get through it, right? Building is hard, change is hard. And the only way that we can get to the end and that we can get to the future that we know that we can have is just taking those steps and making sure that we go 1 foot forward in front of the other. Okay, let me rephrase that. The only way that we know that we can get to the end of change is just by putting 1 foot forward in front of the other. Someone asked me recently, basically, how have you been able to stay on these childhood projects of yours? How have you been able to run this like pipe dream that you've had for 5 years? Like for me and for a lot of other Gen Z run nonprofits, a lot of people start a project or they take on something or they have an idea. And it goes really well for the first 5 to 6 months, and then it fizzles out. And people don't come back to it, or people realize that it's too hard. And the thing that I told them, and the thing that I wish someone would have told me, is basically getting through something and making change is like getting married. You have a problem, you have a solution, and you dedicate yourselves to it. So relationships and love, the average relationship therapist will tell you that love is actually not an emotion. It is a choice. And you have to wake up every day and you have to look at your partner and you have to say, I say yes to you and I want to work on this relationship and I want to continue to grow what we have and I want us to be the best that we can be. And Astra and all of the projects that I've ever experienced is about waking up and saying yes. Even when it's hard, even when it sucks, even when you really mess up, you just have to say yes every single day to make change. There's no other way around it. There's no shortcuts. There's no, speed run through. You just have to wake up and have to say yes, and you have to keep putting in the work. And one day it'll happen. So the final thing I wish someone would have told me was the future will only contain really what we put into it now. And if we want a world that's safer, and if we want a world that's kinder, and if we want anything that we imagine, we have to start planting those seeds. We have to start talking. We have to start sharing. And we have to make sure that we're actually putting in the effort right now to get to a future that we want that's very far off. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of pain. It's a lot of time and energy. But every day I think about my friends, and I think about the people that I love, and I think about my cat, Pumpkin Spice Latte, and I think about my dad, and I think about the amazing people that I work at Astra with, and I think about how much I love them. And I look around at the world, and it's hard. It's really scary. Like, I'm sure all of us at some point have been this year like, what's going on? It's hard to live in a world that's so unstable and to live in a future that's so unstable. And when you look at the people that you love and you think about the planet that they're going to have, and if you have kids, thinking about the planet that they're going to inherit, it's scary. You can really feel overwhelmed, and you can feel like it's bad and that there's nothing that you can really do to fix it. And whenever I get hit with just those massive waves of this is awful, I hate everything, I remember I can't control if something will be changed. We can't control how people will feel, or if they're going to like our product, or if they're going to do, or if they're basically going to like us, So the only thing that we can really do is we can just put in the effort to make the change that we want to see. And we can look at the people that we love, and we can look at the things that we do, and we can start every day, day by day, doing those small things, saying yes, leaning in, having these conversations, sharing these things that we wish we would have known, sharing the things that we wish we would have knew. And we can just do that every day. And at some point, they will snowball to make the future that we know that we want. But until then, we have to do the work, and we have to just get through it and get the change done that we want to get done. So one of Astra's signature catchphrases is getting you to the future that you deserve to see. And when I think about our projects and when I think about our apps, every time I look at it and I say, is this getting them to the future that they deserve to see? Is this making them safer? Is this making them, a better person? Is this making them, have a happier life? And that's how you create change, is you day by day, put the time, put the effort into really small steps and planting the seeds for the future. They might not grow now. They might not grow in like 3 to 4 years. But the important thing is, that you did it. And that you put in the effort and you put in the time to build a future that you would want the people that you love to have. And that is my talk. Oh my gosh.